listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Suns Show.
Hey there, welcome to the show, everybody. We got another midweek episode of the Suns Solar Panel. As always, I'm your host, Dave King. Today, I'm fortunate enough to have a guest host on here. I met Tim way back. The first time we met was actually back in 2014 at the All-Star game in New Orleans. This is Tim Cato. He's been covering the Mavericks since probably the year he was born. I don't know. It seems like you've been covering the Mavericks a long time. The Suns play the Mavericks twice this week, so I thought this would be a perfect time to get an old friend on the show. How you doing, Tim?
Dave, I am doing great. Waking up here in downtown Phoenix, here for the couple games this week. Let's talk some hoops.
Let's get this going, man. All right. So you are listening to the Solar Panel. We are always free, always fresh, and we're presented by the Basketball Podcast Network. Check out that DraftKings promo in the lower corner of this video here, and if you use that promo code, you'll get a big discount. Totally different than the big discount you get from everyone else's DraftKings promo code. Completely unique. So go on DraftKings, use our promo code. I get credit for it. While you're here, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. If you're watching this on YouTube, obviously, set your subscriptions and your notifications and stuff for all of our shows and do a thumbs up. If you're listening on the audio version of this, leave me a 5-star review if you're on iTunes. All right, let's get going. Tim, so the Suns play the Mavericks. The Mavericks are 9-4 early on in the season, and the Suns play the Mavericks 2 games in a row. First of all, what do you think about this back-to-back in the same city, 2-game series, kind of like baseball style? What do you think of that?
Do the Suns have any other ones off the top of your head?
It seems like there's 2 or 3, I think, on the schedule.
Because the Mavs go to LA after this, and they play the Clippers twice. So they have a back-to-back baseball schedule, and I know there's at least one more, a back-to-back games against Sacramento at the end of the year. So this is something Dallas is going to be dealing with a lot, and I know that it's a continuation of the COVID schedules and trying to adapt to the world that we're in, reduce travel that way. I don't mind it, but I think there is. I would imagine the stats actually bear this out, and I know the long-held wisdom is that if you play a team twice in a row in the regular season, it's more likely to be a split than winning both games. So, I guess in that sense, it might be a detriment to teams, better teams playing worse teams or things like that. But it does allow some like in-game or like game-to-game tactical adjustments, which I think are interesting to keep an eye on and analyze.
It's tough, man, because the regular season, see, Suns fans, we're going to act like we've been there before. We had one playoff run in 10 years, but Suns fans are clearly seeing that there is a big difference now between playoff series and regular season games. Nobody preps for anybody in the regular season. You just play out your game. Occasionally, you might get okay, we really know this guy, so we're going to play him the one way defensively. But most of the time, you don't have defensive scheming against a player that that isn't totally obvious. Like if Luka, we'll talk about Luka in a minute, but if Luka was playing against the Suns this week, there'd be trapping, and then we'd see what would happen based on that. Although that he kills you when you do that, but really, of adjustments like in the playoffs. However, these home and home, these back-to-backs against the same team in the same city, you have plenty of chance to actually try that out. And you're right. It seems like it would lend itself to splitting the 2 games. But actually last year, the 2 that I can think of off the top of my head right now, the Suns had an early season back-to-back hosting Denver, lost both games in overtime. Both went to overtime. One went to double overtime, lost them both. And then the 2 games in Dallas, they beat the Mavericks twice, right?
Yeah, you know what? Now that you say that, I guess that's right.
Yeah, and that was one of those was on a buzzer beater. So it does make for very close games and interesting games, but I'm not sure. I don't know. We'll just see. I think it's kind of cool. The players don't quite have to travel as much. They get to rest in between games, and the second game is always more interesting than the first, it feels like. So the Suns are playing the Mavericks twice this week, Wednesday night and then Friday night in Phoenix. But then, and it was going to be a nice big matchup between Luka Doncic and Deandre Ayton, as always. Those are at least headliners for us in Suns land on can we beat the guy that the Suns should have drafted? And so far so good. But now all of a sudden, Luka decides that's the perfect opportunity to roll up his leg against another player and twist his knee and ankle. Is he avoiding the Suns? Is he tired of losing to the Suns, Tim?
He is. He is. He told me after the game that it was specifically this matchup that just struck fear in him, and that he's hit game winners and played on, in high stakes basketball games, but something about the Suns just really gets to him. No, it's funny because it was almost literally the last play of the game.
Mm-hmm.
One you could argue, it looked like the Mavs could have wrapped up a little sooner. Now that's a bad faith argument. Luka didn't get hurt because the Mavs didn't play a little bit better in that game, but it certainly was a situation where it was so close to him not being on the court, the game being over, to the extent that when he kind of hobbled off, there was no way to even ascertain how severe the injury was that night after not getting any information from Jason Kidd, because there was at no point would he have come back on the court or been ruled out of the game or anything. There was like 45 seconds left, so it does appear he's going to miss a few games. But everything we've heard, everything I've heard is that it's not serious. There's no damage to the knee or the ankle, and that it's just going to be a day by day thing. So I think I would be, he's for sure going to miss Wednesday's game. I think just based off my reading of the situation, I'd be a little surprised if he plays on Friday as well.
Yeah, it's just early season precautions. DeAndre Ayton sat out an extra week basically with his sore knee after he got his knee bumped and bruised. And folks, by the way, lower leg contusion is knee bruise. It's okay just to say knee bruise. I don't know why we have to say lower leg, but at least it's not as bad as hockey where they just go lower body injury and it could be anywhere from the hips down. But still, it was a knee bruise. He knocked knees with somebody, DeAndre Ayton. He's back. He played Monday night against Karl Anthony Towns. So the Suns tried really hard to have the matchup, and now Dallas is screwing that up. So thanks a lot, Tim. So anyway, let's talk a little bit more about the Mavericks start. They're 9-4. Oh, before I go any further, I didn't even take 5 seconds to tell everyone who you really are, Tim. I said you've been following the Mavericks for a decade at least now, even though you don't look old enough to have been covering the Mavericks for a decade. I believe you are. And tell us, I knew you when you were Mavs Moneyball. Tell us where they can find you now and what kind of work you're doing.
Yeah, I'm at The Athletic, which it feels like everybody is at The Athletic, or a large
except
percentage.
Anyone in the Phoenix market. But yeah, go ahead.
That's I don't think I'm allowed to share thoughts on that. No, I might have them. But yeah, man, I think that it's been a good place. I like you said, I went from Mavs Moneyball to SB Nation covering full time to The Athletic now. And so, my work's there, doing a lot of interesting features, anything I find interesting around the team, whether it's the backstory to a video they did for the City Edition rollout, or front office reporting. Like, it's a wide mix of stuff that I do over there and that they let us. So yeah, Tim _Cato on Twitter. And that's the rundown.
Tim's a great follow. And it's not just Mavericks things, although you do cover the Mavericks daily. And again, you're even traveling as we can see, you're in Phoenix right now. Okay, so let's talk about the front office for a second for the Mavericks. There's been some upheaval in the past year or two. The Suns franchise is going through a little bit of scandal right now with how the owner is treating players and staffers and things like that. At least that's the allegations by ESPN in a long researched article interviewing 70 plus employees. This is the Phoenix Suns situation I'm talking about right now. And now the NBA is going to conduct an investigation with a law firm they use for every owner investigation, every governor investigation of a NBA franchise. The last investigation they did was of Mark Cuban and his organization with the Mavericks, and you did some reporting on that, Tim. Can you tell us what you think the NBA is looking for in those investigations? Are they looking for reasons not to hurt the team and the owners, or are they looking really to make things right?
I think that, without being the active reporter in either of these stories, I think the big difference is active versus passive. Um, in the case of Phoenix, it's Sarver actively accused of doing these things that even though they're in the ESPN story, there was some there was some instances of culture being facilitated by Sarver, but it largely focused on actions he did. Whereas the Mavericks was very clearly wrapped around a passive involvement and I guess allowance to happen, from Mark Cuban. Whereas when they conducted this investigation and when they interviewed 150 plus people, it does seem that none of those people ever pointed fingers at Mark himself. It just said that he didn't do enough, that he was
He
too
just turned a
uninvolved in
blind
these.
eye.
Exactly, and I think you can argue may have purposely taken a blind eye at
Mm.
times, but it still was a omission of knowledge and a lack of oversight, rather than him specifically saying things or doing things or allowing things to happen, with active knowledge of them happening. And so, I don't know how to feel about these independent investigations. I think to some degree that the one the Mavericks did really didn't uncover more that hadn't already been reported.
Mm.
Certainly didn't identify any other people that hadn't been identified by previous journalistic reporting. Even though at least one more name came out after the report did. That said, it was thorough and it didn't hold back in terms of all of the bad actors that had already been identified. I've even talked to people who went through these interviews with the investigations, like Mavs employees, and it was it's certainly a thorough process. It's really hard to, without being closer to the Phoenix situation, it's really hard to
Mm.
have an idea exactly how it will end up. But in terms of differences, I think that's the main one.
Sure. So, yeah, on one hand, you've got Sarver being actively accused, like you say, whereas Mark Cuban was never actively accused. He was just the guy who turned the blind eye. But we don't have the smoking gun that Donald Sterling had, or I forget the name of the Atlanta Hawks owner, Levinson, I think. There was the email, so there wasn't. So Sarver's somewhere in between. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a months long investigation. Heck, they're still investigating the NBA. I don't know if it's the same legal team. It's probably not, but they're still investigating the potential issues with the first day of free agency and deals having been
Chicago and
made
New
within
Orleans.
30 seconds. Chicago and New Orleans, and that investigation is still going, and we're months later. So don't expect anything really fast, Suns fans. We'll see what happens. There will be occasional leaks of progress and investigations, but that's about it. Let's move on to present day. So present day, the Suns are 10-3. The Mavericks are 9-4. Are the Mavericks where you thought they would be this season? And how much better or worse do you think they'll be going forward? Like, give us some insights into the Mavs and how they're doing this year.
Yeah, they're 9-4 right now, and it's a weird 9-4. They have lost badly to the teams that are better than them, up until maybe Denver on Monday, and that's the one that they're coming off of. And then they've beat bad teams, but they haven't done it convincingly. I believe on the season, they're -1.
Yeah,
So
they're
they
net negative.
yeah, despite winning 9 of their 13 games, they're still a net negative team, and that comes from big blowouts and close losses. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's been interesting to track them. And I was actually looking for, like, the Luka injury is a bummer because I was looking forward to this stretch of 4 games against the Suns and the Clippers, because I felt like we would have learned a little bit more about them. And that's been something I've been saying, and other people analyzing the team have been saying here in Dallas, is that it's been really hard to know exactly what this team is. Through 10 games, it felt like, this is the same team it was last year and the same team it was the year before. This is, in fact, actually the same starting lineup they ran out 2 years ago to start the season. And the roster hasn't changed that much. So it's both a understanding of what this team is, as we've seen a very similar version of this team for 2 years in a row. And then just the idea that even though they're winning games, they haven't been as convincing as a typical 9-4 team might be. And there's been some concerns that have obviously come from that. Now, I do think that things are trending in a direction that indicates the Mavericks will be getting closer to the team, the best versions of themselves this season. I expect by the middle of the season, they're going to be playing better than they are right now. One thing that we're seeing, for example, is that the starting lineup with Dwight Powell in it has been blitzed and has been, just really ineffective this season. They're something like -50, -70 on the year. And of course, as the starting lineup, they've played the most minutes.
Of course.
Although Jason Kidd has persisted with using that lineup, and I think there's a few reasons why that might be the case. He definitely is going away from it and going to one big lineups that have been more effective throughout this season, with a lot more urgency and frequency throughout games. And so, even though the coaching staff, got some criticism early on, look, there's still a bunch of smart people over there, and I do feel like they're slowly, but surely trending kind of towards a better version of what this team should be. And so while I don't think that the Mavericks will be the 3rd team in the Western Conference, I also don't think that they're, completely illegitimate winning this 9-4, even if some of the early wins are fortunate or at least statistically, it's good. But at the same time, it's good to win. It's good to stack wins early, no matter how.
Well, the Suns are 10-3 at this point, and really nobody would say that Suns are playing their best basketball right now. They're not shooting very well. Chris Paul is just coming up with new variations on records, and first guy ever to do this and first guy ever to do that. But even he doesn't look great yet. The only thing great so far about Chris Paul is he's back to being that ball hawk defensively, man. His hands are the strongest hands, I feel like, per pound in the NBA, per size of player in the NBA. And I remember in the old days before he came to the Suns, he would just rip the ball out of a ball handler's hand and then just grab it and go the other way, to the point where it was so clean that most of the time the ball handler wouldn't even complain saying he was fouled. He would just complain that he got stripped. And we didn't see that in the first year in Phoenix. Chris Paul was a little bit more passive defensively than I recalled, although he was still very good. The Suns were 6th overall in defense last year after being 17th the year before, with everybody the same but Chris Paul pretty much. So he obviously impacted the defense, but man, he has just been incredible. He's got more steals in the first 12 games than anybody in a long time. And he's 36 years old. But the Suns are not playing at the top of their game, and they're at 10-3 because they've had an easy schedule. So like you're saying, the Mavericks haven't had quite as easy a schedule as the Suns. Actually, the Mavericks schedule has been a little more difficult, but not a lot. So they've gotten some closer wins against lesser teams. They haven't really proved themselves against better teams. It is a shame that we're not going to see Luka in these next 2 games. That would have been fun. But let's talk about a Luka-less Mavericks for a couple of minutes here. And then I'm going to go back to the Suns. So Suns fans, hang on. But I want to talk about what are we going to see from the Mavericks this week. Are the Mavericks nothing without Luka? They've still got Kristaps Porzingis. They've got Jalen Brunson. They've got a host of guys who are really good players. Tell us what we can expect from the team this week.
I would imagine it's Jalen Brunson starting in place of Luka. He's been excellent this season. I think his per minute numbers are not that much more, but he's maintained those numbers as his minutes have increased. And because the Mavericks are a team without much shot creation outside of Brunson and Luka, Brunson has been crucial for that reason. Kristaps has also played his best 3 games of the season. I think actually his game against Denver was one of his best games since maybe last year's bubble. It's been
Is
a
he
long
moving
time.
better this year?
He is. Defensively, he's been a lot more effective because he finally had that summer where he wasn't rehabbing something, and he did have a appropriate amount of time to get into the level of shape that he expects and has been wanting to get into. And so I think it's a big question how Porzingis reacts and does these next 2 games against the Suns and going forwards. But that's our immediate focus. Brunson, if Brunson is excellent, if the 3-point shooting is going down, if Porzingis can score, and if on top of that the Mavericks can play scrappy defense, which they've been pretty solid thus far this year, I think that's probably their winning formula for one of these 2 games against the Suns. But it would probably take a little bit of outlier 3-point shooting, which can happen. That happens in the NBA. But they're going to need one of those like 18 made threes and 55% of them going in or something like that. Or at least in my mind, that's kind of the winning formula to beat the Suns without Luka.
Yeah, so let's talk about Kristaps a little bit. He's been hobbled last couple of years. Ever since he's joined the Mavericks, it seems like he's been rehabbing some kind of injury or dealing with some kind of injury. But his best stretch last year was when Luka was out for another injury. Do you feel like Kristaps is that kind of guy who's going to put 30 and 15 up every game Luka's out again this year, and B, do you feel like there's anything to him not playing as well with Luka as he does without Luka, and why?
I definitely think that over the years of their partnership, there has been friction and there has been a lack of understanding of Luka clearly being the number one option, the plan A in Dallas, and Kristaps needing to understand that he needs to fit into that. That said, I feel like I've seen positive signs from those 2 players playing together recently. It was a couple games ago against San Antonio where the Luka Porzingis pick and roll, which you would think would just be like a staple of the Mavericks offense. It really hasn't over years, and we finally saw some of that, and we saw it be effective, and we saw it again against Denver, and so I'm a little bummed out not to see the continued development and progression of that for this team. But I don't know. I'm very curious how Porzingis will react, because I do feel like he's finally settling in and accepting this role where he needs to make Luka better. And he does. He's a complementary player to Luka. And now that Luka's out for at least a couple games, or at least one game, I'm hopeful that he doesn't just completely revert back to these New York habits, even if by circumstance he'll have to do that a little bit more. He may take a few more mid-rangers and post-ups. I just hope that he still kind of remains this guy who's finding shots around the rim, finding smart opportunities to post up and mismatches, and still taking a lot of threes. Because if I were him, I would be taking. I don't see why 10 a game is something unrealistic for a player like Kristaps.
Do you feel like there's a lot of the bigger mobile forwards in the game who everybody says, gosh, they're the perfect 5 in today's game. They're the perfect center in today's game, so teams can go small. Yet so many of these guys don't play center very often for one reason or another. Anthony Davis being the most obvious example of this. The Lakers keep playing big guys next to him, and because I think it's because he's insisting on not playing the 5 on a regular basis. Is the same? Tell me what it is with Kristaps. Is he more of a 4? Does he want to play the 5? Are the Mavs better or worse with him at the 5?
I think they're better they've certainly been better this season than him paired with Dwight Powell. I think that enough big men have made this argument that there has to be a little bit something to it, that it is easier for them over the course of 82 games to not take the primary, defensive matchup against a big man every single night. That said,
Yeah.
I think that the Mavericks will continue balancing some of this. Maxi Kleba has been injured since I want to say the fourth or fifth game of the year for the Mavericks, and I think the starting lineup, it's possible it would have already changed, and it would have been Maxi
Yeah.
Kleba in place of Dwight Powell if Maxi had been healthy, and that's a big man that I think complements really well with
Because
Kristaps.
they can interchange,
Exactly.
right? Depending on the play, depending on the matchup or the switching or the defense, whatever,
Right.
they can take turns being down low.
Right. And Maxey is also a player that doesn't ever need the ball and is a good spot up shooter. So whereas Dwight Powell is someone that his best skill is rolling and setting screens. And if you have on the court not doing that, just hanging out in the dunker spot,
He's just an
or
extra guy.
Lord forbid, trying to spot up, he's just an extra body. And Porzingis, who wants involvement and wants activity in this offense, there was a lot of instances where Powell and Porzingis were getting in each other's way, or worse, in Luka's way. And so I think if you swapped Maxey in for that, there would be more ability to have the two big men and have the interchangeability, like you said, for those two big men in terms of who they're guarding defensively. But still just have a healthier lineup, all things considered.
Let's talk a little bit about the Suns for you from afar, right? So what are you seeing from the outside? I know you're not watching all the Suns games and all that, and you're not supposed to, but I'm curious just about the feeling, the take of a non-Suns local about the team. And we already talked about the Sarver allegations, so we don't need to go into that a little bit, but anymore. But I want to talk about Deandre Ayton. So nationally, I'm sure you're aware that Deandre Ayton is one of the few number one picks ever to not get a max extension from the Suns. On one hand, he had a great playoffs and helped carry the team to the finals, helped push the team to the finals. But on the other hand, he has not been a lockdown, perfect number one option on offense, which is what usually number one picks end up being. So he's a very unique situation. What do you in Dallas or just nationally, how do you feel about the situation? What do you think the Suns should have done?
It's tricky. I agree that talent-wise, or not even talent-wise, the archetype of who Deandre Ayton is, very talented player, very good center, doesn't seem like a max player to me. But at the same time, I think I'm pretty jaded about the NBA in some ways, and I think that any team making a finals run with a number one pick that they drafted just a few years ago, who's going into free agency, I find it hard to believe, unless this player is much worse than Ayton actually is, for that player not to just realistically demand and receive the max, a max contract. I just kind of think that's how the NBA works.
Yeah.
I guess that's my thinking here. I agree. Like he doesn't quite seem of that level. I don't know how close to the max Phoenix ended up offering. But I also understand that Ayton realistically, pragmatically would just be like, max me or else. And
yeah, according to the GM, James Jones, he basically said the Sun side, or excuse me, the Ayton side was not interested in anything less than the 5-year max and not to come to the table with something lower. And the Suns just never bothered coming to the table with something lower. You can make whatever you want of that. Really, the Suns have always gotten really good deals with their free agents, for better or worse. It seems like for better, obviously, since the Suns have the most wins in the NBA in the past year. Obviously, it seems like it's for the better, but they got deals on Chris Paul. They got a deal on Campaign. They got a deal on everybody they've signed. And Ayton was the first one who said, I'm not giving you a deal. I'm giving you the contract I'm supposed to be getting because I'm a 22-year-old former number 1 pick who delivered exactly what you wanted. I mean, if you thought of my whole example is, can you imagine talking to Ayton before year 3 and Ayton going, I'm going to want a max contract extension next year, and James Jones saying something outlandish like, fine, carry us to the finals and I'll give you a max. And Ayton be like, how can you put that on me? Blah, 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 And so I can imagine that being the outlandish thing that you would throw out there as a GM going, fine, you do that, I'll give you the max. Because what else could they ask of him than to be the defensive anchor on a finals team? No matter what you think about how the Suns got through the playoffs with other teams' injuries, they still got through the playoffs, and no other team did. That's just the way it was. And Ayton was a key, setting records for efficiency on offense, rebounding like crazy, setting all these records. And yet they still don't offer him a max. So people in Phoenix are a little confused, and we'll see how it shakes out in a year. But your take is basically every take that I've heard, which is, yeah, he doesn't fit the bill of a traditional max player, but he has done everything you would expect, and you would give the max to him anyway, because that's the way the NBA works. D'Angelo Russell has a max contract, for God's sake. And that's only because he scored more points than Ayton, I guess. It's kind of like the 6th Man of the Year award. If you score more points, you get it. It doesn't matter how great a 6th man you are. You've got to score the points. All right, so that's the Ayton situation. Let's talk about Devin Booker. Devin Booker, on one hand, he's a 2-time All-Star, great number 2 on a finals team, has proven himself to be good on a winning team, still is good on a winning team, if not better. And yet, is he yet a shoo-in for the All-Star game to actually get selected this year? Or is he going to get squeezed again by guys like Ja Morant or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and guys like that? Because all the usual suspects are back for this year's All-Star game again. So what do you think about Devin Booker's chances of being like an obvious choice for All-Star versus a fringe choice?
Right. Honestly, I think so little about the All-Star game. So last year he did not make it.
Correct. He didn't
That's
get
right.
voted by the coaches. He was the first injury replacement.
That's right. I do remember that controversy now. Where did he land in All NBA?
All NBA, he did not make third string any of the All NBA teams, but he came close supposedly, but he didn't make it.
Right. I mean, I feel like top 15-ish player is about where he lands. Right in that pedigree. And I say this as someone who loves Booker. I thought years ago that he was criminally underrated, and I feel like that reputation, just from afar, just as an NBA observer, I don't feel like his reputation is underrated in the sense that I used to. I feel like that finals run did a lot for him, and
the Olympics too.
And the Olympics, certainly. And then, partly what those runs do is just reveal more of his character. Like, people know Devin Booker loves fancy cars and old school cars, and they know about Suns in 4 and that guy, and they know all these things about Devin Booker that he's no longer like back of mind just because he plays for a team that isn't winning many games. And so I do feel that, wherever he falls, I think top 15-ish player is about right. And, if he gets bumped down in the All-Star game, yeah, he should be an All-Star player for sure. But I haven't done the math. I haven't looked at exactly who his competition is. I would assume that I would vote for him over Devin Booker. But I don't think I will have a vote this year. I don't really want one, to be honest. But yeah, I think after that runs, it would be hard for me to say that he is that he hasn't built up that reputation in a way that I thought he was deserving of. And I think nationally, I don't get the sense that it's just people looking him over anymore.
All right. Final question for you. Thank you so much for your time today, Tim. I know you got to get to shoot around for the Mavericks. Final question for you is, where do you see the Suns in the Western Conference this year? There's a lot of Oh yeah, then there's the Suns. Oh yeah, then there's the Suns, and excitement about other teams. Where do you see the Suns finishing, and how do you see them being? Do you see them being better than last year, same as last year, or were they lucky? What do you think?
I mean, I think this has to be a top 2 or 3 seed. You talked about the schedule being easy for them, and that may be the case, but this 9-game winning snuck up on me. It wasn't
Yeah.
until Dallas, this Dallas game, I started just looking at very basic, okay, what have the Suns been up to? That I realized they had won 9 straight. I think I was still kind of dwelling on that poor start from them. And
Mm,
I have to think that the reason that was happening is that I think we're just all expecting the Suns to win, that they're going to be a good regular season team. And because they're good, they're a damn good basketball team. And so, it's the same situation if as the Mavericks. It doesn't really matter who you're playing. It matters how you're playing to an extent. But I think the most important thing, especially if a team starts slow and you expect them to get better, the most important thing is just to make sure you're winning early, because that gives you such a base and pedigree to build off of
mhm.
during the rest of the season. We're over 10% of the way into this season.
Right.
We're almost 15% of the way into the season. We, like it or not, 13 or 14 games is a sizable chunk of the calendar. And to start like that, and I mean this for both teams, I think that's only a good thing and only sets you up for success the rest of the year.
All right. Thank you so much, Tim, for coming on. I appreciate that. Suns play the Mavericks twice this week. You get to check out everything that Tim does. Tim Cato, you can find him on The Athletic. Are there where else can we find you, or what are you working on? What's your latest work?
Oh man. Nothing I can shout out at this exact second. Not big reported stuff, I promise. Well, reported, but nothing that's
Sure.
gonna break.
Shake the world. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I did a cool story about the behind the scenes of the Team City edition jersey, and this video that the creative team put together. So I think that was a good read for Monday, and that's on my Twitter, Tim_Cato. And
All right.
I think that's my only shout out. So yeah.
I really appreciate it, man. Tim, you do a great job covering the Mavericks, and just check out his work anytime you can, folks. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see what happens with the Suns this week. I'm Dave King NBA. You can find me on Twitter there at Dave King NBA. Of course, my name isn't Dave King NBA, but that's my Twitter handle. And that's because back in the day, I used to think maybe I'd cover more than the Suns, and I really haven't. So and the handle's the handle. So that's what we got. You can find my writing at brightsideofthesun.com, and you can find these solar panel episodes a couple times a week. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching on YouTube. I appreciate your time, Tim, and y'all have a good day.